You know that feeling when you've read absolutely every book on a subject, like maybe it's investing or a parenting guide or even a wilderness survival manual. You've got the text highlighted, you've memorized all the acronyms, and you're just sitting there in your armchair thinking, okay, I've got this. I am basically an expert now.
Right. It's that classic armchair general effect. I mean, everything makes perfect logical sense
Yeah.
when you're just looking at the diagrams in a quiet room with a cup of coffee.
Exactly. But then you actually have a toddler screaming in the middle of a silent library, or the stock market completely crashes while you're on vacation.
Or it starts pouring rain while you're lost in the woods.
Yes. And suddenly all that theory, it just feels
Yeah.
very, very far away.
It evaporates. That's really the gap between theory and reality.
And that specific tension right there is what we're unpacking today on the deep dive. We're looking at a really fascinating talk by Chris Myers from Dwell City Church, and he uses this metaphor that I just think is perfect for this. The ship in the dry dock.
It's a powerful image because if you think about a massive ship sitting in a dry dock, it looks incredible. The engineering is perfect. The paint is fresh. It's just massive.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to stand there on the concrete, look up at this thing, and say, wow, that is unsinkable.
Right, because it's not actually doing anything yet. It's just sitting there looking pretty.
Exactly. It's potential energy versus kinetic energy. The ocean doesn't care about your specs or, how shiny your paint is. The ocean only cares about your hull integrity when the waves are 40 feet high.
And that is exactly where we're heading today. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this specific source material, the farewell discourse from the book of John.
Right.
And the central question Myers poses, which honestly is a question for anyone trying to hold on to convictions in a crazy world, is how do you stay afloat when the dry dock is gone? Like, how do you live faithfully when the pressure is actually on?
And just to clarify for everyone listening, we aren't talking about having a bad hair day here. The context of this source material is vital to understanding the weight of it. We're looking at John chapter 16, and if you look at the timeline, this is occurring less than 24 hours before the crucifixion.
So the clock is really ticking. This is not just a casual Sunday sermon.
Loudly ticking. Jesus is eating with his disciples, and he knows exactly what's coming. He knows that by tomorrow he will be executed.
Wow.
And he knows his friends, these guys sitting right in front of him, are about to be left completely alone in a world that has suddenly turned incredibly hostile. So what we're reading here is basically a survival guide.
It's like the final briefing before the mission goes critical. And Myers defines faithfulness here in a really specific way, right? Because I think we often view faithfulness as just believing the right things in your head.
Right, just intellectual assent. But Myers is much more rigorous than that. He defines faithfulness as a daily, moment-by-moment commitment.
Yeah.
He says it involves intimacy, worship, and obedience to Scripture. And crucially, he points out that this obedience happens both internally, so how you process your thoughts, and externally, in how you actually treat people.
Which is an incredibly high bar, especially when things are falling apart around you.
Absolutely.
So Myers pulls out 3 specific knowledge nuggets from the text, things the disciples really needed to know in their bones to survive the storm that was coming. Let's dive into the first one, because this is where the history geek in me just completely woke up.
It really is fascinating. The first anchor point requires us to understand the who and the when. Myers points out that the author, John, wrote this account around 90 to 95 AD.
Which is literally a lifetime after the actual events took place.
Decades later. And here's the detail that really lands for me. At the time of writing, John is the only one left.
The only disciple.
Yes, the other 11 disciples. They've all been martyred. They were executed for this exact faith.
Wow. So John isn't just taking dictation for a history book here. He's the last man standing.
He is the lone survivor. And he's writing to a church that is facing what Myers calls vehement persecution. We're likely talking about the reign of Domitian here. These weren't people who were just getting mean tweets.
Right. So what does that practically look like for that original audience, for the people actually reading John's letter?
It means severe social and economic strangulation. These are people losing their jobs, being totally ostracized by their families, or even being unable to buy food in the market simply because of their association with Jesus. They are terrified.
So when John records Jesus saying the Father loves you, it's not just a nice sentiment for a greeting card.
No, it's a lifeline. But it's also a massive theological disruption. And this is really the first big takeaway from the source, the shift in access. In the text, Jesus tells the disciples that the time for figures of speech is over. He says, essentially, you can ask the Father directly in my name.
Now, to a modern ear, that sounds pretty standard. Okay, sure, I can pray to God. Why was that such a huge disruption for them?
Well, you have to look at the Jewish framework they were operating in.
Mhm.
For centuries, access to the presence of God, specifically the Holy of Holies in the temple, was incredibly restricted. And it wasn't just limited, it was terrifying.
Right.
Only the high priest could enter, and only once a year on the Day of Atonement.
Oh man, this reminds me, Myers mentions a detail about the high priest's vestments that I've heard before. But in this specific context, it really hits home, the rope.
Yes, the rope. Tradition holds that they would actually tie a rope around the high priest's leg or waist before he went behind the veil,
Just in case?
just in case he had unconfessed sin and died in the presence of God. If he dropped dead in there, nobody else could go in to get him without dying too.
So they would just have to drag his body out by the rope.
Exactly, they pull him out.
That is just visceral. It paints a picture of God as almost radioactive. You don't just walk in and have a chat. You prepare, you tremble, and you really just hope you survive the encounter.
Precisely. It perfectly illustrates the immense distance and the raw fear associated with the divine back then. So, fast forward to this dinner. Jesus is looking at these guys and saying, the system is changing.
Yeah.
You don't need a priest to go in for you. You don't need a rope. The Father himself loves you, and you have direct access.
It totally changes the dynamic from a courtroom to a living room.
That's a great way to put it. It's a shift from a strict hierarchy of fear to a familial relationship. But Myers is careful here, and I really appreciate this nuance. He notes that the phrase, the Father loves you, is a really hard sell when you're actively being persecuted.
Oh, for sure. If you're losing your job or going hungry because of your faith, you might look up and say, hey, this doesn't feel very loving.
Right. If you love me, why is my life so hard? Why is the ship taking on water?
Yep.
Myers argues we have to broaden our evidence for love. We tend to look for love only in obvious blessings, getting the promotion, buying the nice house. But he points to basic provision. Literally having breath in your lungs, food on the table. He even cites the weather, pointing out rain as a sign of God sustaining the earth.
And then he throws a pretty big curveball in there, too, discipline.
Yes, he does. He quotes Hebrews 12:6. The core idea is that if a parent lets a child play in traffic, that's not love. That's neglect.
Right, love is pulling them back.
Exactly. Sometimes strictly to keep them on track. Discipline actually proves you belong to the family.
And he also points to the community itself, the church, as a tangible manifestation of that love. Like the actual person sitting next to you is the proof.
Exactly. So that first anchor is this brand new direct access to a loving Father, regardless of the immediate external circumstances. Which brings us right to the second point. And this is where we have to finally talk about the Titanic.
The Titanic, the ultimate symbol of human hubris. But before we sink the ship, we really have to look at the disciples' reaction again, because right after Jesus says, I'm speaking plainly now, the disciples get a little, well, cocky.
Cocky is definitely the right word for it. They basically say, now we get it. You're speaking clearly. We believe you came from God. We know everything now. We don't even need to ask questions.
It goes right back to that armchair expert idea we started with. They think because they understand the vocabulary, they understand the reality.
They mistake clarity for maturity. They think, oh, I get the concept, so I can totally handle the test. And Jesus checks them immediately. He asks them point blank, do you now believe?
And that is not a high five kind of question.
No, it's a direct challenge. He predicts that in a very short time, literally that very night, they aren't just going to fail. They're going to be scattered to their own homes and leave him to face death completely alone.
That specific phrase, scattered to their own homes, is really interesting. It strongly implies a retreat to safety.
It does. It's raw self-preservation. And this is exactly where Myers brings in the Titanic analogy. He takes us back to 1912. The ship is sitting in the dock. The press is calling it unsinkable. There's that famous line, maybe apocryphal, but it fits the mood perfectly. God himself couldn't sink this ship.
Well, in the dock, it's easy to believe that. The water is totally calm. You're tied securely to the pier. You feel big and strong.
But the test isn't in the dock. The test is the voyage. Myers argues that we are all exactly like the Titanic when we are in our safe spaces, our church groups, our small groups, or honestly just living in a free country where we don't fear arrest for our beliefs.
They feel bold.
Right. We sing the songs. We say, I would never deny my faith.
But sincerity isn't the same thing as strength.
That is the key insight of this entire section. The disciples were sincere. They weren't lying to Jesus at that dinner. They really believed they would stand by him. But their faith was completely untested. And as soon as the Roman soldiers showed up, as soon as they hit the iceberg, they scattered.
Okay, so let's make this real for everyone listening. Most of us probably aren't going to face Roman soldiers in a garden tonight. So what does scattering look like for a modern listener?
Myers updates the list for us, and it's pretty convicting. He suggests we scatter when we prioritize reputation management over truth.
Oof. Yeah, that lands.
Right. It's the fear of criticism, it's the worry about losing status at work, or even just that awkward social pressure where a conversation turns to faith or morality,
Yeah.
and you just stay silent because you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the weird one.
You retreat to your own home. You retreat to the place where no one is actively challenging you.
Exactly. That silence is a modern form of scattering. It's a retreat from the open ocean back to the safety of the dock.
Yeah.
Myers' point is that faith is revealed by action under pressure. You can believe you are brave, but you don't truly know until the pressure is applied.
So we have the assurance of love and access, and we have this pretty stark warning that we might be weaker than we think. That brings us to the third point. And honestly, looking at the source, this one feels like a complete contradiction.
It's definitely a paradox.
Jesus says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. Sounds great. Sign me up for peace. But then, in the literal next breath, he says, in the world you will have tribulation.
It's a total whiplash moment for the reader.
Yeah.
Here is peace. Also, here is guaranteed suffering.
How do those two things even coexist? Usually I define peace as the actual absence of suffering. So if I have tribulation, by definition, I do not have peace.
And that is exactly the definition Myers wants to completely dismantle. We need to look at the original language here to understand what's really being said. The word used for tribulation is thlipsis.
Thlipsis. What does that imply?
It doesn't mean a minor inconvenience. It's not getting a flat tire or waiting in a long line at the grocery store. It conveys anguish, torture, or a squeezing pressure. Think of a literal crushing weight. Jesus is promising them that the world is going to actively try to crush them.
Okay, that sounds terrifying. So if I'm actively being crushed, how can I possibly have peace?
By entirely redefining peace. The word used for peace here is shalom. And biblical shalom isn't just quiet. It's not just the absence of noise or conflict. It's a profound sense of wholeness, stability, and completeness. Crucially, Jesus locates this peace in himself. He says, in me, you may have peace.
So the peace isn't found in the circumstances. The circumstances are the crushing weight. The peace is in the connection to him.
It's like the eye of the storm. The storm is raging all around. That's the reality of the world. But there's a center point of true stability that comes from a source entirely outside the chaos.
Then Jesus drops a mic with this final claim, take heart, I have overcome the world.
Which, again, requires some nuance to understand properly. Because if you just look out the window, the world doesn't look particularly overcome. There is still war, there is still sickness, there is still intense persecution. If he overcame it, why is it still so messed up?
That's the million-dollar question. If the battle is supposedly won, why are we still fighting?
Myers clarifies that overcoming here doesn't mean the immediate destruction of all bad things. It means he has conquered the actual values of the world. He has defeated the ultimate powers of sin and death. The war itself is decided, but the skirmishes are still happening.
It's like V-Day in a war. The treaty is signed, the ultimate victory is secured, but there's still fighting on the ground until everyone finally goes home.
That's a really good analogy. And this leads directly to the final perspective shift Myers offers in his talk. It's what I like to call the zoom out.
The 100,000-year view. I love this part of the source.
It's brilliant. To help us understand this overcoming, Myers asks a genuinely provocative question. He asks the congregation if, in 100,000 years, anyone is going to care if the Baltimore Ravens won the Super Bowl.
As a sports fan, I feel personally attacked by that, but I get the point.
It stings a little, but it's true. He's arguing that our life on Earth, even if we live to be 90 years old, is a blip. It's a millisecond compared to eternity. The things that stress us out, the tribulations we face, even the really severe ones, are temporary.
It's the long game to end all long games.
It really is. Myers suggests that if our goal is just a calm life right now, we will always be disappointed because Jesus explicitly promised tribulation. We were promised the squeezing. But if our goal is communion with the one who overcame the world, then we can actually take heart. We can be courageous even when things are falling apart because we know exactly how the story ends.
It entirely reorients your priority. The ultimate value isn't a life without bumps. It's who you are actually with during the bumps.
And that brings us right back to the dry dock. The ship isn't built to just stay in the dock forever. It's built for the ocean.
Yeah.
The ocean is dangerous, yes, But the ocean is where the ship actually does what it was created to do.
So let's pull all of this together for everyone listening. Myers gives us three solid anchors for when the ship leaves the dock and hits the open water.
Anchor one, know the Father loves you. And remember, that means direct, rope-free access. You don't need a mediator anymore. You have a parent. You don't have to be afraid to approach the throne.
Anchor 2, realize that faith is proven in the ocean, not the dock. Don't be surprised if you feel weak when the pressure hits. That's the scattering we talked about. But use that awareness to line in rather than retreating to safety.
And anchor 3, take heart. The world is squeezed, but it is also overcome. The pressure is very real, but it is temporary. The peace is eternal.
I want to leave you with one final thought from the source material that I am honestly still chewing on. Myers points out this really counterintuitive idea about peace. We spend so much of our energy trying to smooth out the road, trying to remove every single obstacle and conflict so we can finally relax. We think, once I get this problem solved, then I'll be peaceful.
We think peace is the destination. We think peace is the garage at the end of the drive.
Exactly. But if you look at this text, peace isn't the destination at all. Peace is the vehicle. It's actually designed to function during the tribulation. It's an off-road vehicle, not a luxury sedan sitting safely in a garage. It's meant for the bumps. It's meant for the mud.
That's a beautiful way to put it. You don't need shalom when everything is perfect. You need it when the walls are closing in. That's when the vehicle actually proves its worth.
And that is the deep dive. Faith isn't about magically avoiding the iceberg. It's about who is in the boat with you when you hit it.
Stay curious, keep asking the hard questions, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks for listening.